All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Hook the Line and some more bracketology talks. Like we said, we do this every week. We're going to be doing this on a Friday, so we got a big Saturday coming up, but a big last week of games, some upsets, most notably probably UNC taking down Duke, which our friend Spike, who we had on here last week, as
Yes,
well as
sir.
myself, said that that was going to happen. That's a big win. Funny enough, then UNC goes and drops a game to Miami right after that. So the things we love about college basketball.
Yeah, no, shout out Spike to shout out actually I'll give more credit to yourself, but Spike for hopping on the UNC trend. That was a crazy game. Came down to the end. Trimble hitting that shot. That was nuts. Um, Duke also bounced back from that. I'm sure that was just a little hitch in the road, but um, yeah, we'll see how they build off that. Definitely going to be talking about them in this episode. So let's get into it. How do you want to approach this?
Oh yeah, so setup's gonna be a little bit different. We've been doing a little bit different each week, which I kind of like. Throw a little flavor in there, mix it up a little bit. Today we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be going through basically same kind of thing we've been doing with our Sweet 16 kind of top four seeds, except we're gonna list it based on rounds of the tournament. So we're gonna start with our Sweet 16 teams that we think will get in, then our Elite Eight teams, Final Four, and then our champion. Not in any particular order. It doesn't have to really make sense. It's just these teams will end up there at the end of the day, depending on who they beat. We're not going to talk about who they might play, anything like that. Those are just going to be the teams that end up there on that given day. And then we'll go through one sleeper team that might be able to make a run, or maybe a team that's already in there that could challenge for a national championship. And then one fraudulent team who we either have bounced out or one of these teams that we talk about that we just don't think will go as far.
Yeah. Second that. Which should we go first with? Sweet 16? Should we jump into the frauds, sleepers?
Let's go frauds first. Let's get the frauds
Frauds
out of the
first.
way so we can really
All
talk
right,
about the teams that are going to be here in the end.
all right, I'll lead us off.
All right.
Straight into the frauds. Yeah, these two teams I feel like get a lot of hype. I'm going with two just because
I have two as well.
one's more bold than the other, but I would say they're pretty bold based on popularity in the sport right now.
Mhm.
My first one is St. John's. Not a huge fan of the brand of ball. Tino's a good coach. I have a lot of respect for them. They had a big win against UConn. Just don't love the performance in the non-con. I think that they rely a lot on Ejiofor and in Hopkins that they don't really have those kind of guards that really um, are able to elevate them in a neutral site game. So I think that they can get a bad matchup in the first or second round that could, unfortunately see them gone by the first weekend. And um, I think that, the team that takes them down is probably going to be like a slower paced team, which I'll mention in my sleeper. But I think a team that can really slow them down and beat them in the half court on both sides of the floor. Because I feel like they rely a lot on their getting to the free throw line. And sometimes we see that go away a little bit in March. So just a little bit of concern there. But to more of my bold pick, this is a team that kind of reminds me of St. John's last year,
Okay.
just kind of getting a lot of hype, putting a lot of wins together, but I really don't see it working out. Um, and it's the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They're gone for me. I think they're round of 32, like St. John's was last year. I think they're going to be able to take down a lower seeded team because of the high draw and the seeding. But if you give me one of the more seasoned 7, 10 seeds, I think they're going to be able to get bounced. Reason I say that is just kind of, there's not a ton of experience on this roster in terms of elite non-conference play and neutral site and big arenas. Like we mentioned before, Nebraska has never won a tournament game. I'm sure that'll snap this year, but I think just if they get a solid seasoned 10 seed, it might present them a challenge. And I thought that they played okay against Purdue. I really thought that Purdue did not play that well defensively in the first half, and Nebraska still didn't find ways to get points on the board, which is really concerning if you're a Nebraska fan. They did put it together in the second half, which I thought was good because I think Hoiberg is a good coach. I just think that there's not a ton of continuity on this roster that kind of puts them over the edge, kind of like some of these other teams that I'll get into. But um, yeah, they're on upset alert for me, especially in that round of 32.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I mean, Nebraska was one I think I looked at for a while. The other one I very closely looked at and I actually did take as well. So my first fraud is also St. John's. Like this is a routine thing now over the last like 3 years where St. John's just the way that they play just allows them to get caught by any team, just the slower half court, not really high percentage three kind of team, which you need to be able to make some threes when it comes into March, and especially when those twos aren't working or they get into foul trouble, anything like that, they kind of lose depth. Like we saw it last year when they got bounced. I mean, foul trouble just eats them alive. So I've never been a huge fan of St. John's. I also think the Big East is a little bit weaker this year, so maybe you've got some teams in there that have played a higher level of competition throughout the regular season, while St. John's is kind of them, UConn. Maybe you can sprinkle some other teams in there on their given day, but I think the lack of competition and then what we saw at the beginning tournament in the non-con, you kind of mentioned there. Obviously losing to my Auburn Tigers, who I love, but aren't really any good this year. So that's a tough one. But it seems like a lot of teams got some wins against St. John's that normally you would want St. John's to take care of business again. So I've got St. John's there. The other one is going to be similar to you, except I'm going to go SEC. I feel like this is the SEC version of Nebraska. I've got Vanderbilt on here. And I think Vanderbilt's a good team. I think that they're actually better and they could go farther than Nebraska. But I think they run into a lot of problems just in terms of depth wise. And if their point guard, Tyler Tanner, isn't playing well, I feel like they're going to struggle a lot in that aspect. They also just haven't played an amazingly difficult schedule. And the tough teams they have played, they haven't done too well against. They beat Bama, but LeBaron Philon didn't play the entire second half, and Alabama was up going into the second half. I know that because I needed it to get an over on points, and he never returned to the game, and I lost. So that's the reason why I watched that game. But yeah, Vanderbilt's in there for me. I just think that they're one of those teams that are just going to get beat by somebody that's like an 8, 9 seed, maybe a 10 seed. You could even go as far as a 12. They might be a common pick at the 5 spot or the 4 spot to get upset.
Yeah. Another team I was considering just because I was thinking about it in case we want to throw another team. That way we're not saying the same team is Arkansas. I don't know how I feel about them. I think that this team kind of reminds me of Cal's team with Dillingham and Shepard. They got two solid freshmen,
Right.
but when you have those two that are like dominating in minutes, it gets me kind of nervous. Especially on the biggest stage in college basketball like March Madness. So that's another team to watch. But
Yeah.
all frauds,
No, I do
fraudulent, I
love
guess I'll
Darius
say.
Jacobs though. I'll give him
He
that.
he's good. He's good.
So tough. I do I like that guy.
Hey,
But
but so is Dillingham. So is
I
Dillingham.
know. No, and he was one of my favorites as well. So it seems like I enjoy those teams, but they're not long
They make you
lasting.
nervous. They make you nervous a little bit.
Definitely do. They make you sweat. I mean, we saw Oakland. Cal in March is just he's gonna have some sweats. I
He's
mean,
hit or miss.
yeah, he did better last year, but we'll go then straight into that, into the sleepers. Go from the fraud, some of the teams that are good bounce. Now we'll go into sleepers. I can go and lead off with this one. Um, I've got a Big East team in here. I just mentioned the level of competition, so like maybe I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but I'm taking Villanova in here as like a weird, sneaky 8-9. I think if they end up in that realm, I think they're one of those teams that could give a high seed a push. Whether that's a 1 seed and whether they get the win against that or not, I think it's just a team that's going to scare people to come up against as an 8-9 because they do have experience. They do play a really solid defensive style of basketball that can slow teams down. And if you're not hitting on your day, they can take advantage of that. They've played UConn to OT, so like they've shown that they can, hang in there with some of the big dogs in there. And so I think they might get somebody. I think they might get somebody slipping. And I think we always kind of see a high seed. Last year was the first year that I can really remember where there wasn't a high seed kind of floating around come later in the tournament. So maybe we get back to that this year, and I think Villanova could be one of those teams.
Solid. I did like that play. They played a good game on the road against UConn, brought them down to the wire in OT. Um, that's the only one you got for now?
I do. I have a slash here, and then I have UC San Diego, who's a team I was obsessed with last year. And they're not even performing that well this year. I just, like I feel like I have some emotional connection to them because I took them in my bracket last year and I started like watching all of their games and
Hmm.
now I just want them to do well. I also think it's sick that they're the Tritons. But I think realistically, I think they could steal a game. I think they'll be a 12, 13 seed and they'll be one of those where people are kind of like, okay, one of these 5 seeds or 4 seeds is going to go down. Who's it going to be? Are we going to take
Yeah,
San Diego or are we going to take like Belmont or somebody like that? So we'll
yeah.
see. I like Tritons.
I'm curious to see who is that popular upset pick this year because that was the one last year. But if they can get in, who knows what will happen? But I like it. Bold for me. I also have two. I have one that's more of a deeper seed, and then one that's kind of power four, but
Mhm.
kind of slept on a little bit. So the deeper one, it's going to be Yale Harry. I'm sorry. I just like the way that team is kind of that program is kind of built. He really I forget that coach's name, but the program is built on player retention and continuity, and they've been in this tournament a few times, so like it's not like this is a shock to them. They played a couple good games earlier this year against some tough teams. I think they went on the road against Bama before they hopped into Ivy League, but I respect that, and I think that gives you a good test of what you're going up against in March, especially since I think Bama's like flirting with a 4 or 5 seed, and if they end up on the 12th, then that's kind of perfect. But I think that they're sneaky, play really slow, get a chance to slow down a team like Arkansas, like St. John's, right? So that's a matchup I would like to see Yale in. And then my other one, and this one kind of goes hand in hand with my frauds, actually. So I think Yale would actually match up well against St. John's or Arkansas. And then I think this team would match up pretty well against Nebraska. And I think it's UCLA. And I think it's because Mick Cronin, they were able to get a tournament win last year. Didn't really make a ton of noise. They played Utah State, but I like what he did. A lot of guys from that team are still on the team, and he's able to go grab Dent, Xavier Booker, right? So those seasoned guys as well help add to the camaraderie a little bit. And I think that they can absolutely take down Nebraska. And a little weird reason why is because they do play Nebraska in the regular season, so I would be, shocked if the committee put them on the same side as Nebraska, but I wouldn't, put it past them just because there's two Big Ten teams on the 2 seed line right now.
Mhm.
But I think we've actually seen how Nebraska can kind of get tripped up the second time around playing a team.
Mhm.
Hint, hint, Illinois. Um, So, maybe there's that little luck there. I think Dent is a perfect point guard to have in college basketball. I think he plays both as a scoring threat and a passing threat, someone you definitely need in March. He proved that last year. Um, so those are my two sleepers. I definitely could see them making noise. So I would say Yale is more of like a one game, cool story. And I would say UCLA is more of a Sweet 16 run kind of team, kind of like Arkansas last year.
Yeah, and it's funny because UCLA, I mean, I hope you're right because that was one of the teams I was really high on going into the year. And then they hit a wall for a solid amount of time. And you don't know if that's meshing together. They just didn't figure out their system. But as of late, they've played a pretty good brand of basketball. But I'm looking at their schedule. This next, month of February is really going to test them. We're going to get to see, where they're at right now heading into March because they've got Michigan on the road, then Michigan State on the road, and then Illinois at home. Those are their next 3 games, which
Yeah.
I'll be tuned into. So, but if you can get hot at the right time, I mean, we see it all the time. If they can win some of those games and then head into March with a winning streak like they have, they've already built up one as they lost to Indiana in OT, which, sucks, but everybody else they'd been beaten, including our own Purdue Boilermakers. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, UCLA is a team that they're dangerous. They have weapons. They have the players to get it done. They just haven't really brought it together yet.
Yeah, they've had a difficult schedule. Obviously, the Big Ten's been tough. They also played in Arizona and Gonzaga. So like, they've really tested themselves. It's probably hurts them a little bit of the record wise. But if they get in, they're dangerous and not a team that I want to play.
Oh yeah. No, so that'll be fun. But yeah, no, good to keep a note on. We'll keep an eye on some of those sleeper teams and then some of those frauds as we get closer to March. Now we can hop right in, start with the Sweet 16 and then build upward to our eventual national champion. So I don't know if you want to start, if you want to have me start,
I'll
what
go. I'll piggyback because I'm bold. So I got my sleeper UCLA in my Sweet 16 just to build
okay.
right off of it. So
I'm all
I think in my hypothetical world, my la la land, they take down Nebraska. So you will not be hearing Nebraska's name in the rest of this episode. But that's how I think that they get into the Sweet 16. Another one that I think is just funny based on what has already been said. I have Vanderbilt in my Sweet 16.
okay.
I just think that the reason why is more of just like a gut feeling that there's a lot of guys from last year's team, and they obviously got bounced by St. Mary's. So I think there's just a bad taste in the mouth kind of thing, and
Yeah.
they're able to turn it on when the lights get bright, get some favorable matchups, and because they're going to be probably 4 or 5 seed, and hopefully all it takes is a couple of games to get into the Sweet 16. But that's probably where I'll have them. But these other teams are capable of getting here and beyond. But this is where I have them. I got Florida, Texas Tech, Alabama, Michigan State, Gonzaga, and BYU. Actually, is another kind of one that's on the fence. But most of those teams, I like the coaching staffs. I like guards. Texas Tech, obviously been high on them for a while. I think the 1-2 punch is incredible. I think it'll at least get them into this game. And then, Izzo, Mark Few, Golden,
Yeah.
studs on the benches. So I think they'll be able to just, rally their squads just to at least get them into this game. And then, Kevin Young and BYU is really a wild card. And I mentioned that last week, but I think that they, are playing a lot of tough games and it's hurting them a little bit in the seeding, but, it might season them to make a run down the line because they did make noise last year. They had, a number one caliber pick in Devansta, Rob Wright. So who knows with them, but that's kind of more of the risky one. And then I think Nate Oates in Alabama is just like they're just so hard to keep up with. They just score at will. So I think they're on a Sweet 16 streak, aren't they? Since Brandon Miller's team probably, or did they lose in the 32 or something?
No, I think they
I
made
don't know.
Sweet 16 last year. I think they got bounced in the Sweet 16.
Elite Eight,
Really?
Final Four, and then Sweet 16. I think is the last 3 years. But so I think it's at least I feel comfortable saying that they can get here, just because of the style of play and just the sheer pace that they play at. They always play on their terms, and
Oh yeah.
it's going to be hard to stop. But yeah, those are my 8 Sweet 16 teams that will eventually be going down by the following 8 teams that I will share after you give me your Sweet 16 teams.
All right. So I actually have some teams in here that I didn't even put in sleeper, and then some teams out of here that I didn't even put in fraud. So
It's fine.
you're gonna hear a
All
little bit
good.
all over the place. We'll go ahead and start right off the top. I got BYU as well getting in there, and you mentioned that, so that's funny. On the same boat about that, I think they just the pure talent that's on that team is gonna figure out a way to get them far enough. I don't know against like juggernauts and huge teams how well they're gonna compete, but I love Keita down low. Richie Saunders is a bucket. Debansa, obviously, I don't need to say anything about him. And then Rob Wright at the point. I mean, it's a good lineup to bring into any game, and so I'm going to trust them in that regard. Then I got UNC, just a weird little streaky team, but they got it done against Duke. I don't have them going any farther than the Sweet 16. I'll go ahead and say that now, but I do have them getting into the Sweet 16. Just a well-known brand there, making their way back into the Sweet 16 will be fun to see. Then I'll go Virginia. That's going to be the last one of like a little bit of the shockers, getting in there. Virginia squeaking in. I think they play a interesting brand of basketball. Chance Mallory is probably their best player on that team, and he's pretty good. I've kept up with Virginia for the last couple games they've played now. They keep it close, so they're one of those dangerous teams. but they've always played that way. But it's a little bit different than Tony Bennett basketball that was really defensive. They have a lot more firepower on the offensive side now. So I think that gives them a little bit of freedom, to go win some games that maybe in the past they would have had to rely on their defense. So I like Virginia. I like what they're doing right now. And then I got similar to you. We got Izzo, Michigan State, Texas Tech, Gonzaga, and Florida. I've got L in there. And then my final team I have listed off in the Sweet 16 is Michigan. So I've got Michigan
Oh,
in the Sweet 16. So we'll see if, yeah, no, they're not going.
any particular reason? Like, what are you seeing that makes them like semi-fraudulent, I guess,
I
based on
just
this?
don't trust them. I don't know why. Like I just don't I can't wrap my head around it, and it's been like this for weeks now, and they prove me wrong in some way, but like I just don't know if I will ever trust them no matter what they do in the regular season. I think they're just one of those teams that they rely really, really largely on rebounding and size and getting second chance buckets. And if you can limit that and they're not making some of their shots from the outside that night, they've got a really, really tough one ahead of them.
Okay.
So it's
Wow.
just an all. It would just. I think they are more likely to have off nights than some of the other better teams. So that's. I think that's why.
Okay. 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 All right. All right. Wow. All right. So that means somebody in the Elite Eight is also shocking to take them down, I'm assuming, or did you
Yeah, a
just
little bit. I think
okay.
little bit shocking.
Keep going. Keep going. I like
Oh, okay.
this. Keep
I'll
going.
lead us right into that though.
Who's beating
Um,
Michigan?
I've got Kansas. I've got
Okay.
Kansas in there, beating Michigan, and wherever Kansas falls, like I don't necessarily know how far they're going to finish, and with all the Darren Peterson stuff, but I do expect him to play in March, and I do expect Kansas to be elite in March, and I like that's just a gut reaction. And then they beat Arizona, so they prove they can do it without him, but when he's on the floor, I'm going to take Kansas in a lot of games. So I've got Kansas beating them, whether that makes sense when all the seeding comes out or whatever, and whatever. But then I got Purdue, Illinois, and Iowa State. So point of the story.
All right, I'll go into mine. I don't even have Kansas in this, and now that I realize I don't have Kansas in this, and I'll just share my thoughts. I just think the whole DP situation, I'm not a fan of. I don't know why he's just not playing. I just think there's a little bit of selfishness in there. I don't love it. Don't love it for the team morale.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what the hell's going on with that, but um, that's just something that irks me a little bit. But moving on to the four Elite Eight teams, very similar to you. Purdue, Illinois, Iowa State are all in there.
Yeah.
These are elite teams, elite personnel. Um, I think I like the three coaches. I mean, obviously, Paint, ride and die for Paint. I think he's a great mind. I hate Underwood, but I think this team carries him enough to this point. This is his best team he's ever had, but I think he's going to limit them as a coach just to get to the Final Four. I just hate the way he um, goes about his business. Like I just think that after a loss like Wisconsin, you watch the presser, he's just a
Mhm.
grumpy old man. Like he's yelling at reporters. He's like, "Well, did you read the box score?" Like, bro, shut up. Like you're just an asshole for no reason. Like if you watch some of these other head coaches, they handle it much better. Otzelberger is the same kind of way, a little bit, not as level headed as some of these other coaches, elite coaches. But great mind. I think they got a great, solid big three. And then my last team is Houston,
Mhm.
and I don't know what it is. I just think Samson's good enough to get them there, and they got good guys, or good personnel, good roster, good five, but just not a ton for me. Um, Kind of offensively. Kingston's a beast. They're always built around their defense. I just don't know if they have Sharp's good too, but the guard experience is a little questionable. Uzan too, actually. So maybe I'm contradicting myself even the way I'm talking, but I just don't think they get back. I think that these four teams that I'll mention
Yeah.
next are capable of taking them down.
You can go ahead and lead that right into your
Yeah, so
final
I'm just gonna. I wish I had a thing of chalk here because I have all the one seeds in the Final Four yet again.
years.
But this could change because they're all one seeds right now. But Houston could slide up. based on, how Michigan finishes, how Arizona finishes, and because they, we're not that close to being, or we are close to being done, but there are still some huge games still on the slate, so we could see a lot of things shift. But as it stands now, I do have UConn, Duke, Arizona, and Michigan all in the Final Four. Now, who comes out of that Final Four is a bigger question, because I think there are slight flaws to all these teams, but I think one is, I believe in there's a right way to construct a roster, and I think that there's somebody that does it better than most, and unfortunately, that's Dan Hurley, and I have UConn coming out as this year's champion yet again, because I just think that he just does such a good job of like the three phases of building college basketball teams. It's player retention, right? Caravan and Solo, um, transfers, Silas and Terrace, and then recruiting, which is Braylon Mullins, and he just excels at all three levels of them, and then gets them to play in his system, which is probably one of the best in college basketball, right? So he just uses them in such good ways. I think that they're going to get better as the year goes on. They, had a tough loss against Arizona early in the year without Mullins and Reed. And then obviously, they lose one to St. John's on the road. But I really think that that's a championship caliber team. They do a lot of similar things to that 24 team. I will never compare them to them just because of how dominant that team was. But if you really look at it, you can compare them pretty similarly, like Newton and Demery, Ball and Castle. Obviously, Caravan's the same guy, but just some similarities that I like. But where I see the flaws of the other three, Arizona and Duke are kind of similar for me because they have insanely talented freshmen, but I just think that they rely on them a lot to the point where it might trip them up against, a UConn and maybe a Michigan. I'd say UConn would probably play Michigan in that championship game, just because I like Dusty May a lot, to be honest with you. I think he's a good coach. I think he goes about it the right way. Absolutely nailed every transfer. I think that the fact that he was able to field like 5 transfers like that is insane. Actually, not 5 transfers, 4 transfers. I think McKinney's a freshman, so crazy style of play. I think that they've just been dominant not only in the Big Ten but in the non-conference. Like that run that they went on was insane. So I just think that I can't see your other way when it comes to the tournament, because if nobody can really, I'm curious to see how they match up against Duke coming up in a few weeks, because that'll be kind of a tell towards how they stack up towards the teams that are up there in their caliber. Yeah, those are my 4. I think those are 4 incredibly good head coaches and good systems, and the combination of both the system and the personnel just mesh so well. And it's probably the reason that they have they all have 2 losses at least at most. So I would not be shocked if we see these 4 in Indy in April, I think it will be. So
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you remember because it's a while back, but how does that compare to your original Final Four that you put in there? Are those
like
two?
our very first video.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember your original.
Yeah, I think that's 0 for 4.
Oh, you didn't have Arizona or UConn in there? I think you might. Did you have UConn? Maybe you didn't.
I might have UConn actually, because you might
I
have
think we both
better
had
memory than I do.
UConn in there.
Okay, if we had UConn in there, then we're fire. 1 for 4, 25%. But I think that I think Purdue could get there. Maybe that's me at being a homer.
Yeah.
That's another team that I think is actually built really well. Like we keep our 3 guys throughout their whole college career, and then add bits and pieces to help excel. I just think that there's a mental aspect of Purdue that just scares me. Like Fletcher Lawyer can play really well, play lights out, play like a freaking lottery pick, and then just fall off the face of the earth. Like Nebraska, I just think that we're up there forcing shots again. Like there's no rhythm to his jumper. He's just trying to get shots off, be a volume shooter because he knows that we need him, but we don't need him to brick everything. So there's an element to this sport that being hot at the right time. Shout out that 24 NC State team and some
Miami.
of these other teams. Yeah.
See that.
So
Yeah.
um, like I said, it's going to be pretty chalky this year. I think, don't listen to me, but I think that like last year, this top, 8 teams, I think could all make the Final Four, and I think they're the only. This is kind of bold, but they're the only teams that can make the Final Four. But any of them can really do it. It's just going to come down to those final games in the tournament to decide them, and those 4 that I mentioned, and UConn in specific, I think have what it takes from a roster's perspective and a coaching perspective to come out on top.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with, the NIL era and all the stuff that's changing. If it stays more chalky, kind of like last year, whether that was a
Right,
one-off or whether that's a product of the trend that college basketball is starting to follow now. But this will be really interesting because it does feel like there's an upper echelon of teams, and it feels more unlikely to get a big upset from one of those 1, 2, 3 seeds in that first round that you typically see in March Madness, and kind of how we saw last year where the one seeds kind of just cruised. But I'll bring myself into the Final Four now. Obviously, I have Kansas making the Elite Eight. They will not go farther than that, so we're gonna stop the little run there. And then my 4 teams are going to be UConn, very similar. I went similar to you with head coaches, but I do have Houston getting in there for that reason. I do think Kelvin Sampson, I was really hoping he'd get a national championship last year. I want to believe in my heart he'll get one this year. Right now, I've got him in the Final Four. We'll see if I have him getting that national championship. And then I've got Duke, John Shire. I think he's a great coach. You just can't deny the pure amount of talent that's on that Duke team. No
right,
matter, whether they're going to have an off day or an on day, that amount of talent is going to get you to a certain point. Now, it doesn't guarantee you getting you over the hump, which is a college basketball national championship, but it does guarantee you a certain bit of the way where I don't see them getting upset in a freak game
right.
up until then. It's going to take a really good team to beat them. And then, yeah, so UConn, Duke, Houston, and Arizona obviously are my 4. I have to put Arizona in there. What they've done this year has been incredible. And I'm going to stick to trends that I've seen over the last couple of years when I pick this, because I think we look back at that UConn team that did beat Purdue. They were the best team year round, especially when come February, middle of the season. Florida, around this time last year, kind of established themselves as the best team in the country and was playing like the best team in the country. I think Arizona is playing like the best team in the country. And I think regardless of the games they drop between here and now and how they play, I think what they've done up to this point follows that trend. So I'm going more based on that. And I'll take Arizona to win the national championship here. And they do have flaws, but I think so does everybody else. And I think I really trust their guard play, whether that's Burries or Bradley. I think Bradley's going to have to be huge down the stretch. He can't play like he did against Kansas. He really struggled, and I think that's why they struggled. But even the fact that at Kansas, even no Peterson, but at Kansas, they were very close. Even on a day where Koa Pete was off and Jaden Bradley was off, they were still very close to winning that game. I think there's a lot of good signs that come out from that loss, even though on paper it looks like a bad loss. So, and it just shows how hard it is to go undefeated in college basketball. I mean, there's not a lot of teams that can do it. There's pretty much no teams that can do it. A loss was due at some point. They've played a really hard schedule. They've shown who they are. They've shown what they can do. So it was bound to happen. I'm not going to put too much stock in that Kansas loss. If anything, I give that more to Kansas than to Arizona, but I got Arizona winning it.
Very valid. And I think I could probably say confidently that they are a lock to make the Final Four. I just think that the sheer firepower is just unreal. 1 through 5,
Mhm.
even the guys off the bench like Del Orso and some of the other guys. But yeah, that team's scary. I could definitely see them coming out on top. Duke is another one. Like their only losses have come on some freak, last minute of the game kind of things, right? Like you could argue that Boozer got fouled there at the end, and then Trimble hits a crazy 3, and then they barely lose to Texas Tech. But other than that, they've been really good.
And it's rivalry game
So
on the road, so it's like
right,
you got to throw that in there. Like Purdue losing to IU, it's like there's some Purdue
happens.
losses that I take really heavily. That one is more just a personal blow rather than something I look at coming down the
Yeah,
stretch.
yeah. You can't knock them too hard for that at all. And then yeah, Houston. Great point about Sampson. Like that's another head coach that I think could easily get his team back into the Final Four, like Shire. Um, just some nitpicky things that I think that might hold them back, but could definitely see them getting in there. Um,
Well, it kind of makes sense. I mean, you seem to be basing yours off of, if you have freshman guards, you're gonna struggle to win the national championship. You may get it far, which is
right.
Duke freshman guard. Well, actually, no, Duke freshman just period. But then Houston, Kingston Flemings, and then Arizona's got Burries, who plays really well, but still young player. So makes sense. You,
Yeah, and that logic could completely go out the window because I mean this is the best freshman class I've ever seen. Like this is like you know this I could look like a clown in a month or two because of how just the sheer power that these kids have nowadays coming out of high school going one and done. So and I just think that obviously college basketball is at a point where it's better than ever, and the chalkness kind of attributes to that. These teams are so good, but I think that the separator is one coaching, like I've said this entire episode, and then how well do you gel as a team, and like I think only knowing guys for I think how many months, like what 8 or 9 months,
yeah.
as opposed to like Caravan being with Hurley for 4 years, or Braden Smith being with Painter for 4 years, and his teammates Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman. I think that is important. I think you look back like you know Clayton and Richard and Howe and Condon, they all lost together the year before in a heartbreaker to Colorado. UConn obviously is a little bit difficult because they were back to back, but you know Newton and Klingen saw what success looked like the year before, right? Moved into bigger roles, and then they brought in Spencer Castle,
Yes.
right? I just think that there's a kind of a blueprint to what a winning a national championship team looks like, and I think that Hurley does the best job of it. I really wish Painter was able to get over the hump and do it because I think he's so close to it. I just think like Braylon Mullins should have been a Purdue Boilermaker, but he wasn't because he's a one and done type of kid. He's that good, but Painter wants you to stick around and develop as a player. So that'll be one thing that holds Purdue back, and that's just me probably lashing out a little bit. But
Yeah.
I'll stop talking.
Well, for Purdue to get over that hump, I mean, I think we really need TKR to come back to the form that we saw it in. I think part of that is like Clough and TKR just haven't seemed to figure out their best way to work together yet. Like we see glimpses of it and it's great, but over the stretch, I think TKR is like somebody who wants the ball in his hands at all times. And I think unfortunately, Clough is just a massive body that takes up a lot of space down there. So while he is good rebounding, TKR is kind of like, bro, I need you to get out of the way so I can
Right,
work. But
right.
it's not a flaw in either of their points. I think they just play completely different styles where Clough is like, I'm going to clog the paint, and TKR is like, I need my space to spin, get my jump hook off, get a little bit deep into the post. But
Yeah, you're watching them try to play together in real time because they're not used to it. I mean, Trey had to play as a five last year just by himself, kind of used to all this space on the court for him to get to that left shoulder, and then Clough's coming in from a whole different program, trying to fit in. So like that's the knock I have on Purdue, but I think offensively, it's we're as good as any. It's just maybe a little bit defensively because now on the flip side of that, Trey is used to guarding five men in the paint, and sometimes he gets pulled out. And
mhm.
same with Clough to the point where they got to keep up with faster guys. So we'll see how Purdue does. I obviously have high hopes for them, but
Yeah, it's a flaw, but it's also kind of a blessing that that's our problem because it's like they're just going to keep getting better at playing together, as the season goes on. So bloom with
right,
that's the hope.
right. Hopefully, learn through failure and be as good as you can be at the end of the year.
Yeah, so we got Iowa coming up tomorrow. I mean, that'll be a big one, and then we'll see where they end up. But with all these teams, I think, you said it best. College basketball is at the place it wants to be. And, it's best of the best right now. And those top teams, it's going to be a dogfight to see who gets there. But it's going to be fun
And
to.
I think another good point we should talk about is like the seeding is not done yet. Like we still have some insane games to play, and I think that it could shake up the entire seeding, right? Duke and Michigan play each other, and
Oh,
we'll see
yeah.
how much the loser gets knocked. I mean, Michigan's play Purdue, and Michigan has a tough schedule. I was looking at it; they got to play us, Duke, I think Illinois to end the year, right? So they could fall off the one line if they go 1-2, maybe. I don't know. Who sees? We'll know. I mean, those four teams are two lost teams. So I think it would take a lot for them to fall off the one, but. We're still waiting to see which one will end up being the number one overall seed and stuff like that. So still got a little bit of ways to go.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be a lot of fun to see. So it'll be a good time. And then we'll check back in next week, see where we land. I do like this setup. So, if we like this, we'll keep doing it that way. Or maybe we'll throw another wrinkle in there like every week or something a little bit different. But it's getting towards March. That's the point. That's the goal. Eventually, the whole bracket's coming together. So
Yeah, more frauds, more sleepers. It'll keep coming. It'll eventually make what's cool is it'll eventually make its way to a full bracket, and we
oh
can
yeah.
look how we've talked about these teams along the way, that all the way down to the point to when we get the single matchups, and we can actually break it down. So
Yeah, as we get later, maybe a possible mid-major full episode too, because that'll be a
full
good time.
breakdown.
As Miami of Ohio is currently the only undefeated team left. I know you expressed your thoughts last week on fraudulent activity, but they are the last undefeated. So we'll
You
see.
got to respect it. You got to respect it. And they play tonight, so we'll see.
Hey, we'll see if they keep it going. All right, well, that's it for us here. We'll be back next week with more college basketball.